Hey everybody, Cinephile Mike is here, and it is day 48 of Oscar Rewind, my series of video reviews and commentary that reflect the work of this past year's Oscar nominees and winners. I dig deep into those IMDb profiles, and my hope is that you will discover a new, older favorite, or maybe revisit something you haven't seen in a while. As always, I'll be discussing the recent Oscar connection, awards history for the film, box office information, critical response, and as always, these reviews are spoiler-free. Now, before we jump in, do me a favor, click that subscribe button because you don't want to miss any of the cinematic goodness coming your way on this channel. So, we are in the last week of Beat the Heat with double Oscar Rewind before we go back to bi-weekly episodes. And this week, I am wrapping Designers and Their Teams Month. Yes, all the production, costumes, sound, and makeup teams that have captivated us. We're looking at them, and while I feel like many of you are, like me, starting to feel a little superhero fatigue, I apologize, but I'm going to look at the first film in the Powers Trilogy, or also known as the Eastrail 177 Trilogy, Touchstone Pictures' Unbreakable. Written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan, there was a lot riding on this one, as it was his follow-up to the Oscar-nominated and runaway hit, The Sixth Sense, which that one ended its run with 6 Oscar nods. Unbreakable was released almost a year and a half after The Sixth Sense, with Shyamalan working on the script while Sixth Sense was in post-production, and Unbreakable was released in theaters in the fall of 2000. By the end of its theatrical run, the film made $95,011,339 domestically, and an additional $153,106,782 at the international box office, for a worldwide total of $248,118,121. Nowhere near the almost $700 million of The Sixth Sense, but still successful, recouping its $75 million reported budget. Critically, the film was well received. It was a 71% critical rating from 173 reviews, and over 250,000 audience reviews have the film sitting with a popcorn meter of 77%. Award season-wise, while it had no Oscars love, this one slipped under award season radar. It was nominated for several Guild and Indie Award circuits, with a win at the Golden Trailer Awards for the Best Horror or Thriller Trailer. It had a nod for Best Action, Adventure, or Thriller Film by the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films, and 4 Blockbuster Entertainment Awards. Every time I talk about the Blockbuster Entertainment Awards, I miss Blockbuster. All of which were in the acting categories for suspense films. Both of the film's stars, Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson, were nominated for Favorite Actor, Robin Wright Penn in the Favorite Supporting Actress category, and Spencer Treat Clark for Favorite Supporting Actor. Also, fun to note, Samuel L. Jackson was a nominee at the Stinkers Bad Movie Awards for, wait for it, Worst On-Screen Hairstyle. And yes, you can see it in this poster, and if you haven't seen this film, it's pretty bad. So, why is Unbreakable here? Well, like yesterday's Life of Pi, it's for the sound. Not the mixing this time, but the design. Richard King, the sound designer and supervisor of Dune Part 2, won his 5th Oscar this year. Nominated a total of 9 times, he holds wins for Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, The Dark Knight, Interstellar, and Dunkirk, with other nods being War of the Worlds, Interstellar, Oppenheimer, and Maestro. So no stranger to the suspenseful or the comic book world. And fun fact, I was actually going to dissect the first film he did these 2 jobs on, designing and supervising, but as it turns out, I already did. So if you love the sound work here and you're curious, I actually reviewed Magnolia last year in Oscar Rewind Season 1, so you can find that review on the playlist. So, for those who may not have seen Unbreakable, and maybe some of you haven't, I saw it much later after its initial release. Samuel L. Jackson plays Elijah Price, who, when he was born with a fractured skull and both legs and arms broken. He has a rare disease, osteogenesis imperfecta type 1, which basically means his bones are pretty much almost made of, like, glass, which was a nickname that his peers gave him in childhood. Now a more cautious adult, he is prone to illness and a lot of issues, so he moves at a slower pace, and he runs limited edition and art gallery for comic book art. Why comics? Well, as he was growing up, being that he spent years in and out of hospitals, he found solace in superhero comic books, and his passion went even deeper, believing that as the ancient Egyptians wrote hieroglyphics on the wall, Before comics were seen as a business, they were historical texts meant to pass down a history from generation to generation. And that heroes indeed exist and have their other halves their villains, and hence his business. But beware you try to buy a piece for a child from this shop. His theory becomes perhaps more proven that heroes can exist when he meets David Dunn, played by Bruce Willis. David is a former college football star who, as far as he can remember, has never been sick or hurt a day in his life. In fact, what provokes Elijah's interest is that David was the sole survivor of a tragic train derailment accident of the trilogy title, Eastrail 177 line. The two meet, and Elijah tries to get David to believe that heroes exist, and he could in fact be one. And in fact, for want of spoilers, I will say a very special one with a specific purpose. But David, however, has no interest in this theory. He just wants to spend time repairing his marriage to Audrey, played by Robin Wright Penn, and, he has a kind of strained relationship with his son, Joseph, played by Spencer Treat Clark, who believes his dad is a superhero for other reasons. Now, as Elijah keeps mysteriously making his presence known in David's life, slowly David starts to listen and wonder, is some of what he's saying true? And certain circumstances and situations that David's in start to make him wonder whether or not this in fact is legit. But if so, what is the fallout? And here's what makes Unbreakable unique. Shyamalan calls this a comic book movie. Disney, released it under Touchstone Pictures, and since, they wanted to cash in on Sixth Sense, called it supernatural thriller. But it's not really a thriller. It's a psychological thriller. It's a slow burn. As information gets trickled out, we actually don't get a lot of action sequences, per se. Most major sequences, we see the aftermath of things, which is actually really effective, because we, as we watch this, have to imagine circumstances of things that happened. For example, the train derailment, we don't see the train, go off the rails and have a whole Final Destination type opening sequence. We see David looking concerned. We can kind of see from the lighting that the train is moving fast. There's a shot of an extra holding onto a rail. And then we jump to David in the hospital being the sole survivor. There's a little action sequence towards the end, but for the most part, Shyamalan smartly wants us, to dissect everything. And I guess you could say, what happens, like reading a comic book? What happens in between each panel, right? Those white spaces that break up the comic book page. And even the way it's shot, it looks like a comic book. There's a lot of Dutch angles, overhead angles, a lot of fun trick shots, a lot of reflections. Eduardo Serra's cinematography in this is excellent, and how they capture all of the different events that are happening. Even if I will say I think the lighting was a little too dark. Like most, superhero films, especially darker ones, Batman, they have that, it almost looks like they put this, gray wash over the lens. And there's maybe a little bit too much of that here in Unbreakable, which I don't love. So it makes certain things not look as crisp and clean as they could. And I guess my only other thing is the ending is maybe a little too abrupt. It does have that classic Shyamalan twist, but it's a little disappointing. And then we had to wait, 16 years to get our sequel. If you're unaware, Unbreakable was the first, like I said, of a trilogy. The other two films are Split, which starred James McAvoy, and Glass, which brought back Jackson and McAvoy as well. Willis? Well, maybe. Now, the performances. Speaking of Jackson and Willis, here's a great thing. Everything here, when you first watch this film, it's almost like, I don't want to say bad acting, but it's very monotone and very reserved and not a lot behind it. And Jackson and Willis at this point were known for these louder, brash characters, but here they underplay, which is actually a nice choice, because you really have to lean in and listen to the conversation and the dialogue they have. There's no Grand Royale with cheese or yippee-ki-yay, mother, here. So the acting choices actually work, that they're not going over the top. And, mixing in with that, let's talk about the sound work, which is why we're here. Richard King, he lives up to that surname with the work. All of the sounds work excellently, both the realistic and the supernatural that are kind of being woven together. and, accompanied by James Newton Howard's score, everything works. And given that this film relies more on not the fantastical action sequences that you would expect in a thriller or a comic book film, but again, the more dialogue driven, the work is subtle and solid. We don't have to go above or over the top. Now, here's the thing. I will be honest. I did not rush out and see this film when it came out in 2000. I saw it for the first time when I saw Split in 2016 because I wanted to see the whole framework. And I think that was to my benefit, because I don't think the film watcher I was 25 years ago would have appreciated Unbreakable the way that I do now. And if you are in the same boat as me, give this one a rewatch if you haven't watched it since, because there's a lot of really good stuff here. Now, if you want to do that, Unbreakable is currently streaming on Hulu. So you can go and rewatch this one. Now, if you want to complete the trilogy, you have to do a little bit more work. Split is on HBO Max. Glass is available for digital rental or purchase. No streaming information. After this reflection, you know what? If I had given a rating to Unbreakable 25 years ago, I probably would have said 2-3 stars. But no, you know what? This is a really solid, well-made 4-star film. And, it was one of the last good ones we'd get from Shyamalan, I would say, until 2015's The Visit. Everything in between that 15-year pocket was not that strong. Not sure what those films are? Check IMDb. All right. So there you have it, everyone. I will see you tomorrow for the penultimate day of Double Rewind for Designer and their respective team month. As always, if you like what you heard here, please click that subscribe button, like and share the video, spread the word. You can follow me, Cinephile Mike, on all social media platforms and on Letterboxd. Find lots of great additional content on my website, cinephilemike.com. Happy watching, everyone, and until next time, this is Cinephile Mike saying take a break and watch something new.